As leaders, we need to prepare for the future the best we can. It's impossible to foresee events such as the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the 2008 financial crisis, or even a key person leaving the organization. But we can develop the skill sets to adapt, adjust, and overcome to ensure the impact is minimal. Leading into the future means that we as leaders do our best to ensure that our people and our organizations are set up for success. Today, my guest, Deanna Wu David, and I discuss topics such as lanes which people can tend to focus on when thinking of the future, changes which she foresees and leaders needing to be aware of, the effects of technology on organization, how leaders can tackle globalization, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 92, Leading into the Future with Deanna Wu David. Welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome you, the leader who's here to hone your leadership skills, because you know what? We can never learn enough about leadership, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you hone those skills. So if this is your first time listening to the podcast or the 92nd time listening to the podcast, welcome. It's great to have you here. And today, got a great episode as always, guys and gals. Absolutely enjoyed my time talking with Deanna Wu David. So today we're talking about the future of leadership, the future in general. She's the author of Future Proof, Reinventing Work in the Age of Acceleration. This book focuses on how we can adapt our mindsets to be more agile and how we can prepare ourselves for success in the fast-changing world that we're basically in now, / it's even going to get worse as future comes. Before, she used to be a Financial Times executive, but now she works with CEO and board-level executives to boost their agility and collaboration to build a more competitive and resilient workforce. She's worked with Credit Suisse, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, Wharf Management Hotel Group, Expedia, World Bank, Asia Development Bank, and KPMG, just to name a few organizations. That is an impressive resume for sure. So this is what you're getting today. You're getting somebody who has worked at those senior levels, who knows the business, but most importantly has the foresight to look at what's coming down in the future and how we need to be prepared for it. So, ladies and gentlemen, strap in, get ready for a heck of a show. And I'm not going to hold it any longer. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview discussing leading into the future with Deanna Wu David. Deanna, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you. Thanks so much, Scott. Great to be here.
No, it is. And we're just chatting. We're having a bit of laughing and stuff. But it's funny that we're recording, as I just mentioned, on the day when I release a podcast episode talking about the future of leadership and talking about things such as globalization, aging workforce, the new generation that is behind the millennial generation, because as I said in that podcast, I'm like, those guys are old now. Who's coming behind them, right? And the effects of technology on the workplace and how technology is going to continue to change basically the leadership landscape, because it's continuing to change organizations, continuing to change businesses. And a couple of examples in that I used was, the prevalence of self-checkout counters now in shopping stores. You go to your local grocery store over in North America, instead of 10 cashiers, now you have 10 self-checkout things, wickets, and one cashier. So what do you do with those other 9 people? Or the future of long-haul trucking I used as well, and that once we see autonomous drive hit mainstream, like I totally foresee that occupation disappearing. So what do we need to do as leaders to, mitigate, or what do we do with this workforce, these people? Do we keep it inside the organization? Do we say, farewell? All these types of questions. I had absolutely no answers. But in talking with you, it looks like we're going to have some answers.
Well, absolutely. And I'm even calling you from the future, right? I'm sitting here on
Right.
12 hours ahead. So I should
Right.
just charge you to call me and I'll just answer questions about the future for you. Because I'm speaking to you from the future.
Which is funny because so every now and then I throw out awards and you're bumping off somebody of this award, which is the furthest person away from me award. You are by far the person furthest away. The last person who held this award was in, I want to say Dubai. I believe Dubai, UAE. But you are now taking the win and from Hong Kong, which is kind of works for you because I have to actually record it in the evenings and you're working. So it actually works out quite well.
There you go. Yeah. I think all the things that you talk about are really so prescient. I would just say that, the future, we used to say the future of work is now. And I would say that even the future of work is maybe in the past a little bit, because I've spent the last 20 years in Asia managing virtual distributed teams across Asia. And the technology is now just catching up to that. So all of those issues are things that people are grappling with right now. It's not some, dystopian or utopian future that we're preparing for.
Awesome. Love it. I love that little segue. So I guess my first real question is, what led you down this road? How did you come to diving into this focus of looking at future, how people work and tech and, this whole, I guess, hockey, for Canadian slang term, hockey stock of different subjects that you're actually basically an expert in?
Well, when I went to Columbia Business School in a really, really, really long time ago, over 2 decades ago, it was at a time when I was interested in media, and literally the first websites were just coming on, and we had, the first business school class on, I don't even know what it was called. It was something like the internet, an introduction or something like that. And I was really interested in it and started, building websites and Emacs, and consequently went into consulting afterwards, which was a lot of large companies going, oh gosh, do we need a website? But truly also digitally transforming. And so for the last several decades, I've been in a position where I've been looking strategically at businesses to see how they can anticipate the future, and then what kind of projects or programs or reorganization they can do to prepare to be efficient and effective in the future. So it's sort of a long time in coming. Over that time, I've done many different things and tackled it via startups and venture capital and being a line manager at Financial Times in Asia for over a decade, and now have my own company doing much the same, but actually more recently focused on people and how they can prepare for the future, because a lot of the agency of having to prepare for the future is falling on the individual, because companies are big and complex, and it's hard for them to keep up sometimes.
No, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but my mantra is that, leaders are there. They're here to help their people. They should be providing whatever they can to their people. And one of those things that they can, one of the areas I should say that they can help is definitely preparing for the future. And there's a whole whack of different lanes, that could go in, whether that's career, financial, et cetera, et cetera. So what are some of the areas that you focus in on, particularly when you're talking about people need to prepare for the future in that line?
Well, I wrote a book this year called Future Proof: Reinventing Work in the Age of Acceleration. And it really focused on understanding your values, being able to tell your story about, why you were there and what you were trying to achieve across multiple careers, having a strategic network, because I believe that loyalty will be more horizontally distributed rather than tying yourself to one company and hoping to climb the greasy pole or to really rely on your company for your next ability to progress. And the ability to focus. I was at an economist conference in Singapore, and we talked a lot about the always on culture and how to tackle that. I think we have not trained people really to set boundaries with technology or even boundaries at work. And so being able to do that is helpful. If you're a leader, then certainly you need to help your staff do that. But if you don't have a great leader, then you need to figure out how to do that for yourself. And fundamentally redefining success on a broader level, because if you look at statistics, company lifespans are decreasing. And our lifespans, as you rightly pointed out, are increasing. And Hong Kong just knocked out Japan for the longest lifespan of anywhere on earth. So it's a good petri dish to be living in. And we're going to have to make a lot of changes. You know, the pace of change is accelerating, and we can no longer do one thing for a long time and then retire and live off the proceeds. We really have to consider doing multiple things and ourselves tying that thread together in a meaningful way that can be satisfying and get us our next cool project.
So many great little nuggets in there, especially the boundaries thing and redefining success. But one thing which I definitely would like to drill into a little bit more is those changes that you mentioned. So what are some of the changes that you're foreseeing that leaders are going to need to be aware of as we look further down the line? Because the world's constantly changing, right? As I've said many times, and it could be changed by the time that we're done this podcast. So leaders, they generally want to be there. They want to be trying to keep ahead of these changes, to be proactive. So what are some that you're seeing right now that you think are going to be coming out?
Well, I think that the technological disruption has been something we've seen for, a long time, but the pace of that change is really accelerating. So being able to keep up with it is something that leaders, I perceive, or I consider leaders a bit of a buffer. So as the technological change happens, and you can look at this with digital marketing, you could, oh my gosh, like one of your podcasts was on video email, and there's always some new thing that you don't know about or don't know if you should be using. And at one point it was the collaboration software, and people were wondering, should I do Slack or Trello or Asana, or should I stick with Google? There's that barrage of possibility, and leaders should be able to take a step back and say, what is our strategic goal? What do we need in order to fulfill that? And what is, what are the enablers? But then also from a broader product or service mix perspective, really understand, how does technology change our competitive set? How does it, how does it give us opportunities to change the way that we do our business, or what are the risks? So technology is, I don't think that that's changed. I think the pace of change has really made it different, so that we always are trying to catch up. Globalization, I think you see a lot of populist backlash now, but it's really something that people should be able to master, because we do have a distributed workforce. So I go to find the best talent in the world for my business. And if it makes sense, then I don't care where they are. And I was speaking to PayPal about their new fintech report, and, talking about the fact that it's great because I have somebody who does an illustration in Belgium and another person who does my videos in the Philippines, and I just can pay them very easily. And, I don't have to hire them and think about the regulation, the HR and all that stuff. So it is a very much changing landscape, and the demographics weigh into that as well, because you might want to go after markets like Indonesia, where there's a really young population and it's growing. And then if you, on the leader side, so many companies are grappling with the fact that as you pointed out, they have been so focused on millennials, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of people who are 55, have had great careers, retirement age is 60 at their company, and they're being pushed out in droves because of policy, but the company doesn't really want to lose them. They don't necessarily want to retire. We're living ever longer. They're in great health, but nobody really knows how to deal with that. So that is a big issue that companies are grappling with, and leaders need to think about creatively, so as to just get the best talent they can, but not necessarily, on the conveyor belt, using the conveyor belt methodology of human resources that we were brought up with.
You got a lot of different interesting points, which I want to kind of dissect and go a little bit deeper in. The technology one, I think, has been discussed a lot, and I tend to agree with your lines, and it's not going to go away. The pace of technological change is going to keep going, probably up, or it'll eventually plateau for sure. But I think our new norm has become things just constantly change with technology.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that. But the whole globalization bit, I think we need to deep dive into a little bit more, in that you brought up some great points, and, having teams in Belgium and all over the planet doing different things. And now we're getting into more, before we're talking about, virtual teams, maybe a person across the city not coming into work for the day, or in a different city than the one that you're working out of. But now we're talking time zones, we're talking continents, we're talking cultures. How does leaders even manage all of this when we're talking about these mass virtual teams now, that you may not even ever meet the person face to face, but you're still responsible for them. You're responsible to provide them direction, their output. So what are some advice you have out there for leaders in dealing with this new, I don't know, say phenomenon, but it's definitely going there in globalization. The world is shrinking. Virtual teams are even more predominant now in scale that we've never even seen before.
Yeah, you have companies like, Blizzard and such, who are entirely distributed teams. And I have spent a long time managing people, across Asia, and that's not necessarily new, but the way that we can do it with video communications and text messages, etc., I've learned how to do it just by doing it. And I've seen people in my team who have tried to manage virtually for their first time. And sometimes I've done a terrible job of prepping them for that, because I've done it so much that I've just assumed that it's, something that kind of comes naturally. But it's something that's quite conscious. And one of the things that I write about in Future Proof is the fact that collaboration and virtual collaboration and global collaboration as a skill is something that is almost never taught, but needs to be at least considered. So as a leader, if you are going from managing a team where everybody is in Toronto around the table, and there's a lot of relationship building that happens, in the office or after work, and there's a lot of kind of idle chit chat, or not idle chit chat, that sounds trivial, but the ability for you to be in the same room and for me to say, hey, Scott, I had this hour meeting and I just got started on it, and I had a question that'll allow me to go forward. If you're a million miles away and all of a sudden, I'm asleep because it's 12 hours difference, and then I forget my question, it's just a lot of asynchronous communication, and the relationship building also is difficult. So as a leader, understanding how to really change the way that you behave so that the team can feel like they all belong, that they can develop relationships with each other. And it's not just about efficiency. It is about getting to know people, taking time on a weekly meeting call to say, how was your weekend? Tell me about your weekend, which might feel wasteful in some senses, but really can cement the team and get them, an ability to know each other. I wrote a blog post about virtual teams and looked at some of the practices. And, people actually companies will set up virtual coffee dates randomly with other people in the firm so that you can just spend 15 minutes having a coffee break, getting on Zoom video conference and just having a coffee with your colleague 100 million miles away. And so it's really different, and people are just now realizing they need to invest time learning how to be great leaders in that environment.
No, the coffee date thing is so great, and I'll throw a little anecdotal story quickly. I went to the Royal Military College here in Canada, Kingston, Ontario, and me and my close knit group of buddies literally went on Zoom one night, and we sat and drank beers from coast to coast of the country, and everybody caught up. It was absolutely hilarious, but it's the same ideology, right? It's the same thing. It's getting together quasi face to face and having those conversations and making those, reigniting those relationships and just, getting to know each other. So no, it can work. It does work for sure. And to go back to what you were talking about there, and something that came to my mind was that you're discussing having meetings and people all across the planet and different time zones. I guess probably one of the best things for leaders to do is be flexible with their own work hours to maybe sometimes be awake when they wouldn't necessarily be, so that they can have these conversations via Zoom or Skype or whatever with their people, just so that they can cement these relationships in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that out in Asia, working for a multinational, the, legendary complaint is the person who is, your leader, or generally be a leader, saying, okay, we're going to have the monthly meeting at XYZ time, and it's 3 a.m. your time. And so just the sort of common courtesy of realizing that not everybody's on the time zone. Same time zone is nice. And then, I think that it is nice. I would say from my own experience, that everybody has different rhythms throughout the day. And so for one, I'm a morning person, and so every time we have our nighttime calls, I feel just maybe less enthusiastic. I have a lot less energy. So, excuse me. So being able to talk to somebody in my morning is a completely different experience for most people. And I think that if I can do that with my team and my leaders, then that's useful. But then I would say also a lot of people in a time of cost cutting will really cut back on getting people in a room. And especially if it doesn't seem like it's an obvious revenue generator or there's an obvious reason for it. But I think, once a year, being able to get people face to face and provide an opportunity with them to interact and maybe work together side by side is really invaluable. It's just makes the entire rest of the year so much more smooth because it builds trust, and trust builds efficiency. So it is really ultimately worth the time and effort to bring people together.
No, for us to be able to leverage technology to do all these relationship building, team building activities, I think is absolutely essential in today's day and age, and especially in this distributed globalization or distributed work life now. But on the other side of the coin, leaders are also responsible for outcome, right? Productivity and all this stuff. So we're in an area now of VR is basically mainstream. AI is up and coming, basically here. So what are some ways that leaders can leverage these tools and tool sets to use with their teams to achieve what they're trying to achieve? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that starting with, the ultimate goal in mind and not just slapping technology on for its own sake.
Oh, yeah.
And I am so guilty of that. You told me VR has gone mainstream. I was kind of shocked to hear that because I don't think of it as going mainstream. I think it has a long way to go.
Well, I say that because if you for example, I think of back home in Kingston, I walk downtown and there's a VR gaming company where you can walk up, you can rent a VR headset for half an hour, an hour or two or something like this and play games. You can go down to a Best Buy, which is an electronics store here. You can pick up a headset, right? So that's what I mean by mainstream. Not necessarily walking around with VR, but it's easily accessible.
Well, I think that those cutting edge technologies are always really interesting to me, just because I'm curious to a certain extent if that will work. And as you know, I've looked at VR in the study of leadership. I teach a leadership course in interpersonal dynamics to the MBA school at Hong Kong University. And just those basic fundamentals of giving people feedback and unconscious bias, et cetera, some of that is coming up in VR. The idea that you can walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, almost literally. In a way, it's a shortcut, but the ultimate goal there is not to do VR or use VR. The ultimate goal there is to allow us to communicate better with other human beings. And if VR can be useful in that way, then that's great. And the same thing with, collaboration software that we've talked about. I think that that's really important for distributed teams. I have to say, after leaving the Financial Times full time, but still working with them closely, we used shared Google calendars, all these shared documents that are really useful. And we use, it's sort of the being able to edit together, being able to be on the same page. And we work across, we have me and then a couple of people in a Hong Kong office, and we have gone to the World Bank in Washington, D.C. We're about to do a board training in Dubai. We've been to do all kinds of amazing things based on, a couple of shared Google Docs and weekly calls and, and when we need it, then we'll meet in person. So I don't think that the technology has to be robust. On the flip side, I think, and it's maybe not so popular, there's so many things you can do to be efficient. So I think that efficiency is driven by building trusted relationships, but it's also really driven by consciously adopting and perpetually automating tasks that are maybe not worth spending so much time on. So those are the two ways I think that I drive outcomes as a leader and that I see it being done well.
Sorry, something back my throat here. But the show must go on. So what I'm hearing from you is basically not necessarily go after that new shiny piece of technology that's out there, but basically stick to whatever your needs are and what works for you as an organization, whether that's Google Docs or you have to go into the VR realm because you have a need to go there, then go in that realm, but not necessarily go after it just because it's the latest and greatest thing that's up and coming. Is that fair to say?
I would go one step further and say it's about the humans. Right. Yeah. That's what's going to drive your outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, end of the day, the outcome is based off of the person, not the tools. But I do like the point of automating as much as possible, so that people can focus on what's truly necessary. Right? You don't necessarily need people worrying about those mundane things that can be automated with things that are out there today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's better for them as well, and they can continue to grow and move into things that only they can do.
Right. And then kind of with technology, although we're going to talk a little bit about people who necessarily don't enjoy technology, and that is the aging workforce.
Now, stereotype. I can't believe you just said that.
It is a pretty hard stereotype. I will fully admit that. But how do you foresee this? Because you use the example of people who are going up towards 60 and being forced to retire from their organizations. Now, that may be necessarily a local thing because here in Canada, I'm almost certain it's illegal to force someone out of a job just because they're aged. That we got discriminatory laws against things like that. But the point still basically is valid, is that as people age towards that 55, 60 age bracket, organizations are expecting them to retire. They are expecting to free up positions, to bring new blood in, new people in. But they want to stay. So how do you foresee leaders, not necessarily, I shouldn't say tackle the problem, because it's not necessarily tackling a problem. However, it is going to become a bit of a different situation. So what's your thoughts there on how this is going to move and flow and the best way to look at it?
So you actually have an amazing group of people in government, and they have been looking at this issue of not so much that, it's not a technology issue. It is an issue of longevity and demographics, and in that there are a lot of people who would still like to work. And there is, I was so curious that 65 is the off-cited retirement age, but there is no such thing as a mandatory retirement age in Canada. So go you. I'm impressed.
That's exactly it.
And I think the issue, though, is that we don't have precedents for how to engage people, because the reality is that, if you are, let's say, 70 and you have a great deal of wisdom in your field, or even the wisdom of your company, you don't, and you're sort of CEO or CFO or whatnot, there's this linear sense of, oh my gosh, well, I'm not going to take a step back. I better retire, but then I don't want to stop working. So it's just now that companies are starting to, partly enabled by technology, are starting to use different approaches to reintegrate people who don't want to stop working, but may not want to continue working 9 to 5 or 60 hours a week, and in the same capacity. So more flexibility. Maybe they get paid less. Maybe they shift to do something that they can uniquely contribute. So in a multi-generational workforce, maybe I don't know much about Snapchat as a potential marketing medium, and maybe I don't have to know, depending on my audience, but I can provide a more strategic and stable outlook on what's coming down the pike, just because I've seen so much more, and I can work with some of the younger people in a team to, if we evaluate and say, you know what, we got to be on Snapchat, they can actually go and say, oh, well, I've spent, 800 hours on Snapchat. I've seen everything there is to see, and I really want to take that on as a project. And I think that kind of matching across generations and across expertise is a new diversity that companies are starting to tackle well. Marsh McLennan, the chairman, was talking at a conference I was invited to speak at in Washington, D.C., and he said, we have these amazing people that have worked with us, and they still want to work, but maybe not in the same capacity. They are trusted. They know our process. So they've started a platform where they can farm out specific projects that wouldn't be big enough for them to take on to their alumni. And those guys, they know the process, and they can choose to take on those projects or not. And they have a more flexible way to continue working. And so it sort of works with both parties. And it's all based on a technology platform and, collaboration software to ensure that things are on track and they can deliver well.
That is an amazing idea. So in my army brain here, I'm thinking, oh, you basically have a reserve force that you farm out work to, and they can pick it up or not. And that's exactly how we do it with our reserve force. So people who know the organization, they know the system, they know the processes, they know what the outcome is expected, yada, yada. It may, obviously, it's not going to be hypersensitive, high sensitive, deadline driven. It could be a little side project that you want to get done eventually, but it's not necessarily super time bound. You can say, all right, farm that out and say, hey, whoever wants to have at it. And you got this whole this group of people who have all the experience and necessary skill sets to take it on. That's a fantastic idea. I think, just going back what you kind of hinted at there, and you're saying that people don't necessarily like to take a step back. And I think there's this, where ego kind of comes into play, especially with leaders themselves. When we're talking when leaders are at this part, when they're in that age where it's time to, start winding down. But when they're at that board level, they're at that senior management level, a lot of them have a hard time, taking that step back because ego, it may comes into play. I don't necessarily mean ego in a negative context. Ego is present in everybody, right? And everything. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, you need to set that aside and say, you know what, this is what's best for me. And you know what, it's still good for organizations. So why don't I go ahead and take that step back, reduce my hours, leave my position here, go into this pool of people and still contribute. Well, you know what, I'm going to enjoy my 3-day work week. So 4 days off a week and have more flexibility with my life and enjoy my life more. I think that would be such a great idea, but that whole ego part can really hinder people from taking advantage of these programs that may be out there.
It's interesting you say that because I launched a course based on Future Proof the book, and part of it is being able to tell your story. And on the way up, that is, telling the story about how, for instance, you were in the military and how the skills and qualities that made you successful there can translate into the civilian world. And so you see people on the way up thinking about, I want to segue from my job in software sales to digital marketing. How can I translate that? How can I talk about some of my skills? And I think that it's similar to a certain extent on the way, I won't say on the way down, because I think that there's much less linear. It's not like all the way up, all the way down. It's much more, I like to think of it as tours of duty to continue the military theme, and really think about what can I do for these 2 years or this year and a half that would be really enriching and fun, and being able to tell that story to some of the people who are now on the course, who are either, one woman is retiring from government in her early 50s and thinking about what's next. But it's really difficult. It's difficult maybe because of ego or where you've landed. It's difficult because of identity. You've always thought of yourself as, an accountant or a government person or with a certain company. And everybody thinks about what other people think about them, despite how much our parents tell us not to, or, the memes you see on the internet that we all watch saying, nobody cares what you're doing. Just do what you want. The reality is that being able to tell that story well is a safety blanket for a lot of people, where they can say, I was a white shoe law firm for a really long time. And now I am going to help first generation college people graduate because they don't. And, we can get stuck in this, like, I'm not a lawyer anymore. Oh my God, nobody will want to talk to me. But being able to confidently talk about what that next step is and what that next experiment is, I think is a great opportunity for people to have confidence to actually pursue what they want.
No, I think that's a really great idea and great points there regarding the story. Excuse me. One of the things I would add is that language comes a big factor to play, right? Because different occupations, different areas have different language. So I'll take me as an example. So if I told you when my last jobs, I was a highly successful squadron commander, you would say, congratulations, probably, because you probably have no idea what a squadron commander is, right? But if I told that to one of my peers, they would immediately understand that meant I commanded 200 soldiers. I had a budget over a couple $1 million. I was responsible for hundreds of pieces of equipment and vehicles and this and that spread across multiple locations. All those things actually immediately come to play. So the so what is for me is something that I'm currently struggling with, trying to fix, is changing my language so that when I do eventually transition out, I will eventually want to do something different with my life, right? but how do I change my language so that you and everyone else understands me when I tell my story? And I think that's a big thing that needs to people need to be aware of it, regardless if you're military or if you're a public servant or you're an accountant or a lawyer. How do you tell that story in a common language that everyone understands you?
I so agree with that. And part of this bringing together a very disparate group of people is for them to test it and get feedback. So they will put something out like, this is who I am and this is what I want to do. And people will come back from across the world and across different industries saying, I didn't get this part of what you said. That sounds good, but what the heck is a squadron anyway? Whatever it is, how does that matter to me, in the software industry? And that's a really great opportunity to get that kind of feedback, to simplify your language in a way that it can resonate across, as many people as you need it to. That's
awesome.
A great point.
Yeah, it's been a great chat week. I think we could keep going for quite some time, but I do know you got a hard timing upcoming because you're at the beginning of your day, whereas I'm winding mine down here with 12 hours in between us. However, I do got a couple last follow-up questions for you, and that one in particular, which I asked all my guests, and that is, according to you, Deanna, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is somebody who can listen to their people and unlock their potential in service of the organization's outcomes.
Awesome. Love that answer. And then finally, of course, where can people find you? How can they learn more? Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. Where's the book, the course, all that good stuff. Have at it.
People can find me at my website, which is www.diana, Wu, W-U, David, D-A-V-I-D.com. And I do have 11 questions to prepare you for your future, which is a great thing. You can do it every year. You could do it once. It's quite simple. And it really is an assessment to let you see on a very rounded basis how you are prepared for the future and what gaps you might want to focus on and fill. And of course, there's also apropos of our conversation, the first 2 chapters of my book are free for download on my website. And the second chapter is all about trends in the future of work, very researchy. And the others are sort of what to do about it. But if you're really interested in more of the statistics, you can certainly go there or follow me on LinkedIn, because I spend a lot of time talking and speaking and bringing to light the most interesting information about the future of work across the globe.
Awesome. For you guys, for you, the listener, it's easy for you. Just go to movingforwardleadership.com/9292, and all the links are going to be there in the show notes. Again, it's been a pleasure to have you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and talking, and thanks for coming out.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me, Scott. It's been so much fun.
Take care. All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember, R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.